So yeah, I'm Benji. I'm just gonna kind of ramble about some stuff. So feel free to stop me. I'd way rather have it be a conversation than just me blabbing at you. So if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, feel free to interject. I'm happy to be here. I'll just talk about what I do, I guess. So I have very much like a patchwork quilt kind of career right now. So for a long time, I was a full-time professor at Bethany. I did that for 12 years, and just recently, was it 4 years ago, something like that, I went down to adjunct to take a job at the Mankato Symphony Orchestra. I'm still there. I'm the director of operations for the Mankato Symphony, so I do a lot of the concert logistics and personnel and hiring and that kind of stuff. And from there, it just kind of got a little more weird. So like, I'm just kind of like putting together like all these part-time jobs, and somehow calling it a career. You squint hard, now you can call it a career. But music has really been the foundation of pretty much everything. So I got into music through theater, actually. So I did a ton of theater in high school and beyond, and always did band and stuff. Was always a hardcore band kid, marching band, and all that stuff. And when I got to college, I went to Bethany as well. And when I got there, at first I actually started as a music major. At the time, Bethany only had, it was church music or like music theory major. Those were your options. And I wasn't really digging either one at the time, and certainly not, nothing against church music or anything like that. It just wasn't for me. And at the time, I kind of thought I wanted to be a film composer and all that stuff. And it just wasn't stuff there that I was interested in. And so at the time, the theater director was like, "You want to take a stab at writing music for the play that we're working on?" The first one that we did my freshman year was Harvey. Harvey. I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it," and I did it, and it totally sucked. It was terrible. But it really gave me a taste for what I come to really love most right now is adaptable writing adaptable music. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So the vast majority of my work has been through theater. At this point, I've sound designed well over 100 plays. I've probably written music for 50 or 60 of them. And that is just kind of branched out from there. About 10 years ago, somebody asked me to do work on a video game for the first time, which I was totally flattered and had no idea what I was doing. And since then, I started getting into games as well. Games are really, really interesting because they're, especially compared to theater, because games are so slow paced. And theater is like, you have 3 weeks to do the whole thing. Good luck. Don't die. And so it's kind of fun to have like both ends of the spectrum there. And I'm a gamer. I love video games, and so it was a really kind of fun, interesting thing to get involved in and open some doors to. So a lot of the music that I work on is based on some kind of storytelling. Is like narrative composition. Some people call it programmatic music, which I think is okay. It's like music that reflects some other emotional stimuli, whatever that is. And I think the opposite of that is, this is going to sound pejorative, I don't mean it that way, but art music. I love art music, but it's not. So like Beethoven would be art music. Music that is just music, that has its own statement, that has its own thing to say. Just a lot of what I've fallen into and what I think I thrive a little better on is music that's collaborative with other statements, whether that's visual medium, whether that's dance, whether that's video game, whatever. Like I love that collaborative, lots of things combining to create some sort of larger statement that what music is just capable of by itself. And I think there's a accessibility there. And frankly, it's just kind of what you dig and what you're good at too. It's like I've had some opportunities in the past to try just music, and I didn't feel as good about it as maybe some of the other stuff. And that's just my background too. Coming from theater and that marriage of all of these collaborative elements, which is really kind of fun. So that's really where I came from. I graduated from Bethany. I went on to work 1 year at Petco, couldn't handle it anymore. So I went to grad school at wife had a job in town. I really wanted to go to Champaign-Urbana, or for a time I thought I was going to Berkeley and Boston. But it was our right family situation that we stayed in Mankato, and I got my MFA in sound design, and got to write a ton of music through that program too. And that was actually a massive blessing, because I feel like undergrad gave me a real jolt in experience with the art side of creating music and creating sound and that kind of thing. And grad school kind of allowed me to sustain that, but then also gave me the technological side that just wasn't widely available to me in undergrad. So it was a really great balance of stuff that I was able to learn. And after that, we moved out to Providence, Rhode Island. I got a job at Trinity Repertory Company out in Providence, and so spent a few years out there in the sound department, and then also was a resident designer and composer for the Brown University Theater Program, which was just such a jolt of new everything, new types of people, new types of environment. When you live places like Mankato, New Ulm, et cetera, it's like, it's such a small pond of people that do. Sometimes you can get work or get opportunities because you are quite literally the only people or the person who does what you do. And then very, very different out on a place like Providence or Boston. And so, but it's great. We loved it out there. And then came back to work at Bethany. And now you're on Plato. So between, so I still work as I design sound and lighting and stuff like that for Bethany Productions, and help out with some academic stuff. And then also my job at the Mankato Symphony Orchestra. Up until last year, I was the executive director of Pro Music in Minnesota, which performs here all the time. If you guys have been to one of the Pro Music concerts before. And then I'm a freelancer. So right now I'm working on next week we're opening our fall play at Bethany. We're doing it's called What Child Is This? And it's original adaptation of the Nativity story, the birth of Christ. And so it's kind of dark, which I love. And just really kind of a visceral take on the Nativity story. It's quite fun. It's a huge production too. This is kind of my boss's name, I should call my boss, my friend and collaborator, Peter Blale, wrote this play, and it's sort of his magnum opus, I think. It's a sabbatical project, and we are gonna projection map the entire theater. We moved the stage down into the middle of the house, and so we're seating the audience on both sides. The whole thing is 360-degree projections and crazy lights and music and everything. And so that's gonna be great. So
I can't wait to see it. I still have to get my tickets, so I'm figuring out what day works.
Oh sure, yeah,
it's super excited for that.
It's gonna be quite the deal. I'll let you know after Saturday, how with it we are, or how together we have it. It always
the other week was we're still doing things together, but that's just kind of how it works. All the different sides of the art's being put together.
Right, for sure. And this one is just a scale thing. It's such a huge undertaking, and it's got a cast of 25, which is huge. And so, but yeah, anyway, I'll talk about that a little bit in a second as well, on the music aspect of that. So I've got that. I'm working on 3 video games right now. I'm working on 2 films right now. I'm working on, and I just finished a couple big projects that I'll talk about later that hopefully we'll have a chapter 2 later on. So it's, like I said, it's just really a patchwork quilt. You never know what opportunities are going to come. And so, I think it's, I tell my students frequently that, it's just look for windows, look for, be prepared to be surprised by the opportunities that come in your lap, and be ready to seize them. And so, don't be afraid to interject your own, what you think you could bring to an opportunity that might not even be oh, here's a job, here's something, if you see something cool that you're excited about and want to work on, don't be afraid to be this is something I can do, can we do anything? Because that's really how, opportunities can start manifesting and stuff. So, patchwork quilts. So what I want to talk about this a little bit. So I want to talk about adaptive audio, because I think this is I really see music on kind of a sliding scale of adaptability, where it's can be completely changing every second, completely live, kind of unpredictable experience is something that's very staunch and very the same. And I think the first thing on it is film and TV, obviously. So I think I like working on movies. I do a lot of like short films and stuff, but I shouldn't even say a lot. I probably do like 2 a year or something like that. But I enjoy it, but I think it is the least thrilling to me. I think not musically necessarily, but the whole goal of working on a film is for it to be the exact same experience for anybody who watches it, whether you're watching it in a movie theater or just on your phone or whatever. You want to try to make it the exact same every time. And so to me, there's a kind of an attractive volatility that's lost in that, if that makes sense, and something that I think is so cool about live theater is that it is so volatile. Like if you go to see a play, it will never exist in that same energy, that same whatever, ever again. It's a one-time thing in the history of the universe, and that's exciting. I always kind of I always kind of think of it this way too, is what do you do when you have to fold laundry or when you're sick or whatever? You put on the same movie that you've watched 1,000 times just to have in the background. You don't do some of these other things. You don't go to the theater to have the theater in the background. It's just a totally different experience with that kind of performance. So again, I'm not ragging on that stuff because it's great and there's a ton of art there and I love film scores to death. But there's just that sense of staticness that makes it what it is. So moving down the sliding scale is theater, of course, and so theater is kind of a controlled chaos a little bit, this is really where I've gotten to do a lot of experimenting in terms of, especially like music for theater that's still pre-recorded, which is a really interesting challenge because once you record something, it is what it is, right? Like there's of course some things that you do to change tempos or keys or whatever, but it's pretty locked in. So what can you do as a composer to still be adaptive, to still, you never know when someone's going to go up on their lines or trip over their shoes, or you have an emergency stop because somebody fainted in the middle of the house, whatever. Like you need to adapt that, and most of it, if you think about recorded music, once you hit play, it's playing. So how do you do that as a composer? I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Video games is even farther down the line of something I would say is adaptable because you don't know what the player is going to do, right? So you need to you need to guide the player and give the player hints and energy and all of that stuff, but you don't know what they're going to do. And that's very exciting too, is how do you prepare what you have to do that. I'll show some examples. Are you guys video game people at all? Like what do you like? What kind of stuff do you like?
Minecraft.
Okay, good. Minecraft's a good example actually, because there's so much in Minecraft.
I would be if I had more time, and I like video game soundtracks. I know they're really great. I know Hans Zimmer wrote some video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
Call of Duty and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really
And it's such a massive industry right now too. I mean, video game industry is kind of kicking Hollywood's butt right now, just in terms of revenue. I think it's something like, forgive me, I'm kind of making this up, but like it's 8 or 9 times the revenue of Hollywood right now, just in the United States. It's a massive industry. So if you think about it, I mean, like Candy Crush. You guys heard of Candy Crush? You know what that is? So the second Candy Crush game, which was called Saga, the first one did so well that just the music budget for Candy Crush Saga was something like $23 million. They recorded in Abbey Road in London with the London Symphony Orchestra, 72 musicians. So it's like, and it's Candy Crush, it's a mobile game. It's like, it's craziness. So there are opportunities in video games, and we can expand that a little bit to just, like electronic media. There's a lot of stuff. I recently just got to work with a slot machine composer, which was so fascinating. Because like the rules, like there's 3 tempos that you can choose. walking through a casino or whatever, your brain would explode. So like there's really specific rules about writing music for slot machines, and just like the manipulative aspects, or I shouldn't say manipulative, psychological aspects that go into it. It's so fascinating. But yeah, there's just a ton of opportunities. And then of course live performance, which is, I don't know, you guys know what live performance is. And where anything can happen, you know, your conductor could accidentally start a thing 20 beats slower than it's supposed to be, whatever, anything can happen. It's conjured in the moment and it'll never exist like that again. There are of course exceptions to both sides of this as well, right? Like if you go to a huge rock concert or Taylor Swift or anything like that, everyone's on click track. So it's going to be in a way the same every time. And I'm not saying that's bad, but that does kind of take that volatility away a little bit. And then there's exceptions over here too. Several years ago, there was a documentary called Beep that was just about video game sound design and the history of it. And they did a really cool thing where, especially for the DVD presses, that, you know, like when you pop in a DVD, you can play it in a bunch of different languages and stuff. So there's different audio channels available. And so instead of using that for language, they used it for different musical scores, essentially, different chunks of musical scores. So the DVD was programmed that it would grab a different piece of all of those channels randomly. So every time you watch the documentary, you would get a generative different soundtrack every time, which was pretty cool. So there's exceptions to all these things. So this is just kind of where I live and what I think about a lot of how music, especially pre-recorded music, can be adaptive. And I have an example of that. So this one is from a game I love called Abzu. This is Austin Wintory, who might be my favorite game composer. And he lives in LA, he's about 40 years old. He did a bunch of Assassin's Creed games, and he did, he's done all kinds of stuff. Journey is what he's most famous for. But let me just play a clip of this really quick. So yeah, just take this in. So, you're this little diver guy, you're just interacting with the world. So what I have here is the exact same video clip, but so I should mention the previous clip that we saw is footage from the game. This is just me playing Abzu. So this is the same video clip, but it has the soundtrack version underneath it. So just kind of, so the last one was the fully adaptive one where it's taking player feedback or whatever. So this is just the soundtrack version under the same video clip. It's still lovely, right? But it's just doesn't have that influence, that sense of influence. Let me play this one, the first one more time, and I just want to point out some of the triggers that are happening that makes music move with a video game thing. So in this particular piece, the term is stems. So like when you're composing for a thing like this, you generally write your big long thing, and then you take that and export it into little tiny chunks called stems. And you need to think about it in such a way that any one of these stems, these little chunks of music, can be grabbed at any given time and need to play nicely with any other random chunk of music. So it's an interesting mental exercise, so in this case, I think Austin said that for Abzu he created 22,000 stems or whatever. And not to say that it wouldn't grab a random, like, 1 out of 22,000 every time. There'd be like 200 available in this level or whatever. Let me point out some of the triggers that that music is responding to here. And In this case, the game engine is paying attention to the player's pace, like how aggressive the player is. You can see this in, like, for example, like a shoot 'em up game. You know, the game engine will pay attention if you're the kind of player who will just burst through the front door and start like spraying everybody with a machine gun, or if you'd like to sneak around and snipe a little bit. You know, like the engine wants to pay attention to that and give you musical feedback that supports your choices and that wants to do that. So that's what the engine is doing. Your pace, are you interested in more like looking around? Are you a curious player, or do you want to just like get to the story as fast as possible? And the music responds to all of that. So coming up to this cave is a trigger. Entering the cave is a trigger. These little garden wheels. If you get real low to those, that'll trigger music. So that's going to actually cause the music to come down as the garden wheel slows down. And then we just freed this guy. So we're modulating to a new key. That's a trigger. And then you can either play with this guy or continue with the story. I'm continuing with the story, so entering that is going to modulate again into a new key. Give me some feedback on that. If I explore, it'll do a thing. If I go right to the next story point, it'll do a thing. So there's all of these things to kind of take into account in the background of a game. And this is pretty, this is pretty high level stuff. Like the average phone game is going to be a lot more straightforward than this, but this is what makes video game music and truly adaptive and really exciting for the player. And there's all kinds of fun tricks. Again, like going back to shoot 'em up games, there are pieces of software that are always playing in the background that, for instance, will take, let's go with our machine gun example again. So instead of just like a machine gun would do, it'll take that bullet sound and it'll subdivide into like a 16th or a 32nd note with whatever tempo the music is playing at the time. So the machine gun bullets are always in time somehow with the music. And that's not something the player notices, but it's so satisfying, that as opposed to just everything being random, everything is just really glued together.
Polyrhythms.
What's that?
But polyrhythms.
Yeah, right.
Like you get this like type of rhythm that's really complicated, and then you stop to think about it. But it's like it just harmonizes the game that you have. Yeah,
and the software can handle all that stuff too. You can swing your bullets while your music is on straight notes, or like whatever. All that is an option for you. But yeah, thought goes into all of those things. How you want that musical experience to feel as a player.
Is that pretty common, like to have that many different kinds of stems or something with a video game, or is this like kind of on the high end of all the different options?
Probably more on the high end. So I would say most video games work in this way, but on different scales.
Okay.
So anything, kind of the term is AAA. So any of like the big budget games that are coming out for all the consoles and stuff like that kind of have this mentality. And some of them are just like so unbelievably massive. Another video game that Austin Wintory, this guy, worked on recently that I think is so fascinating is that they did a, what do they call it? When you guys were growing up, did you have those choose your own adventure books? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It was like, you're going through. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, you're going through and it's like, oh, if you want to go through the door, turn to page 32. If you want to dive in the sea, go to page 48, whatever. So they made a musical video game. So it's like a Broadway musical feel, but it's all choose your own adventure. So mid-song, like the main characters are like singing this giant belting song, and then you need to quickly, as a player, choose what path that you want to take, and then the song responds to it. And so it's just insanity. I'm not describing it real well, but he said for that one, there was just like hundreds of thousands of iterations that you could do, and so it took them 9 years or something to make that game. So some of them scale up just to crazy things. Other simple ones, even smaller mobile games and stuff will have, like 10 stems to choose from or whatever. So it's usually the usual way to go. Let's see that. Want to talk about that? Sure, I can talk about that. So this is just another recent project that I, just because I love talking about it so much. So this was this was grant driven. So this was another, I guess, kind of piece of advice I wanted to give is that look for grants. You know, if you're looking for any sort of writing music or any sort of artistic anything, there are grants available all over the place. Kind of the big ones in our area is called the Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council, PLRAC. And they give student grants, they give artist grants, they give young career, mid-career, whatever. There's Minnesota is actually a great state in terms of arts grants. There's so much available. And so some of these projects start with just like, oh, there's a really cool musician that I want to work with. And so that can be part of that grant pitch, or just whatever. So this was a grant pitch that I had. So a couple of years ago, I got really into photography as well. And I wanted to go make a Minnesota nature documentary, in short. And at the time, so I was going to spend 2023, last year, just traveling around Minnesota with this little bit of grant money that I got from the state, taking film around the state, and then I was going to write a score to it with 12 musicians that I would just hire and record myself or whatever. And so that grew and grew and grew, and so ultimately, the Mankato Symphony was interested in performing it. So and that's coming up in a few weeks. And so December 6th and 7th, this is going to premiere with the Mankato Symphony, which rocks. And then we got to go and record the score for this in Budapest, Hungary, in May. So it just like grew to this gigantic thing that was so fun. But what I loved about it is that it kind of brought together so many interests, so many things that I'm passionate about and that I just love. You know, writing music for one, writing music for orchestra, which is, those opportunities are so few and far between, and I am underqualified to write. And so like I'm so fortunate that, you know, that I was able to do that. I'd written for orchestra before, with smaller pieces, but doing something like this was just, just pretty crazy. I'm gonna play, just so you can get a feel for it, I'm gonna play just a little bit of it. So basically I spent 2023 camping, doing all this stuff, doing nature photography. I love birds, I love animals. And then took all of that footage and then tried to create some kind of story with it that I could write music to. So that was kind of the goal. So this is kind of what it looks like. We'll go to picture.
How long is it total?
22 minutes.
Okay.
Sometime this is free online. It's oldnorthfilm.com. But it really was that.
How much like do you spend and use in your photography gear?
Can you repeat that?
How much do you spend in your videography and photography gear? Because like yeah, for like your cameras and stuff.
I've been collecting for several years now, just kind of putting the gear together. But because of this grant, I was able to buy my first field lens, like a big 600 millimeter field lens, and that was like $3 or $4 grand, and something that I could not even dream of doing without the grant, you know, like without the whole project coming together. So, and then I got to upgrade the camera body to like Sony stuff that I really love, and so the grant really made it possible to get a little bit closer to professional with some of that stuff, and and it's just been like up and running ever since. I've been just doing so much photography lately. It feeds the soul. I love it so much.
You said this was on boldnorth.com? Boldnorthfilm.com. Okay.
And I brought this. This is the score for it. I don't know if anybody cares.
Oh, yes.
Very welcome to. So I
at the end of every season of shooting, I would take all of those clips, and so each season had, I don't know, 300 or 400 video clips that I would call down and try to make it into a 5-minute movement for that particular season, and then write the music to that. So I know, but this was really fun because I got to dictate the size of the orchestra, special instruments, like I really wanted celeste and harp and that kind of thing. And then, so this is another, I guess, thing that I would encourage you to do, is that when you're working with musicians, everybody loves to teach. So don't be, bring what you bring to the table, obviously, let your personality shine through, but don't be afraid about the things that you don't know. So like, for example, I learned a lot from the harpist. The harp is such a complicated instrument. Oh my gosh, like harp just blows my mind. And so I found our principal harpist from the orchestra, and I was like, I know nothing. Can you like make this not suck? And so just to be like, I seriously like would love a beginner's crash course into how to make your life not miserable when you have to play this. And so everybody loves to teach. Everybody loves to share what they're passionate about. And so never be afraid, like, or never, feel like you need to pretend like you know more than you don't, and have that humility and just be like, teach me. And it's very, very helpful because then you get a better product out of them, the musicians that you're working with, and then you learn so much to begin with. And that's a whole different side of music composition is orchestration, right? Like knowing how to get the best out of whatever instrumentalist you're working with. And I think maybe that's the hardest part. I think it's even harder than starting with a blank page, and which is terrifying, of course, just having and knowing what you're doing. It's harder than deadlines or whatever. It's really trying your best to learn the personalities of the instruments and how you can best express your ideas through, because every instrument is so different, has a different, like yes, a bassoon can play, like way up here, like you're in the right spring or whatever, but can they do that from working through measures? Is that really the sonic personality that you're looking for? And this is really a lifelong pursuit, and so there are people who dedicate their entire lives to just orchestration. So it's a whole other just giant bailiwick.
Yeah. Well, and it's also hard for those of us that just play a couple of instruments. Like I really only play keyboard instruments, so if I'm, writing for a different instrument, it's like, are you kind of comfortable in this range or something? Or like, how does it actually work? And so it's hard for those of us that don't play like all of the instruments to just really learn what is the characteristic of them.
Yeah.
And it just helps to have people that you can ask, like, give it to them and say, hey, does this work for you? Can you play this? Or like, what is comfortable for you playing? Sort of like choral composers, you're learning how to work with voices, like what works for people to sing and stuff. So yeah, that's a good idea to ask people for feedback about what works.
Yeah, exactly. And the other benefit of that too is that it stretches you as a composer too. Because and when you guys are writing too and experimenting too, try forcing yourself to start a completely different way that you're not familiar with. Like for example, I've been playing piano the longest, but I am a painfully mediocre piano player. And so like when I and so
lots of people here understand that.
So I like sit down to write at the piano, my hands only do what my hands can do, right? And sometimes I like the things that my hands can do, but they can only do the limited subset of things. But if I force myself to start a project on guitar, or I'll like find a weird ethnic flute or something at a garage sale, it's like, okay, I'm gonna start this project on this thing that I need to sort of learn how to make a sound out of, and how does that inspire the rest of the thing? It can really force your brain into not just doing your defaults.
Yeah.
And so this was really an exercise in that as well. Yeah, I'll just fly through this really quick. Oh yeah, you got the score already there. I just want to show you some pictures because it was rad. So this is Budapest, and so I had a 4-hour session with their orchestra,
Are you in this picture?
Yeah, I'm definitely here.
Oh, okay.
So this is my conductor friend Ernesto. he's the conductor of the Mankato Symphony, and then also our concert master, this is Sabrina, also they're married, so they're a package deal. So they came to Hungary with me and to do this project, but I was so intimidated, like just so terrified, and I didn't sleep the night before, because I was just so, I wasn't nervous necessarily, because it had been so vetted, and I've spent just like jillions of hours on this thing, so I wasn't nervous, but like, this is like a professional orchestra. It's scary, but they were so warm and so kind, and so, half of them spoke English, and the other half like barely spoke English, but like how we were able to communicate through musical ideas when we didn't necessarily speak the same language was so fascinating and wonderful. And so it was just such a tremendous experience. This is pretty common of a film score, film recording situation. So we recorded with 112 microphones over that, which is insanity. So when I got all of the individual microphone recordings and stuff, I immediately eliminated like a third of them because I just didn't want to deal with it. And stuff that I would never use anyway, like they record a lot of like big Hollywood films and stuff like that, and so I'm not going to deal in surround sound and all that stuff, so I just got rid of all that. But this is Dennis, my engineer, who's super helpful. But this is very typical of a film score situation or video game orchestra score situation where we were back in this isolation booth, and then everybody's on the same measure counter, everybody's on the same click track, every single musician is on click track. And every time that we hit stop on the recording, my mic would open up and I could speak to Ernesto of the entire orchestra, which was, again, terrifying, but they were so like generous and kind about that. And after a couple passes, we got into a rhythm of talking with each other and being able to communicate with ideas. So if you ever go into this kind of stuff too, or if you ever want to work with directors, work on your adjectives too. So like, because directors or, non-music people don't speak in musical terms like mezzo forte or whatever, but, everybody understands syrupy or bombastic, like to really work on your adjectives and how because you're a composer, right? You're thinking musical terms, but how do you communicate that most effectively to an orchestra that mostly doesn't speak English, or to a director or something like that. So emotional adjectives come in really handy.
So you're in the sound booth during that whole process?
Yeah. I would occasionally wander in to try out, to work out with people. Oh, there's us.
I know those people.
Those people are awesome.
So when you spoke into the mic after they paused the track, would it go like into their earpiece?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so some things that we would ask my engineer, who was bilingual, to very specifically translate into Hungarian, really specific things. But for the most part, everybody got it. And the other really interesting thing that happened was, this is their full-time job. So these musicians will probably work a 10-hour day and record 3 or 4 different projects. So they're also professional sight readers. They don't see a single note of music before it's placed in front of them and we hit record, which is so impressive. And so if you think about that, and this is how all of these recording orchestras work in Hollywood or in London or in Vienna, where the big ones are, is that it's just these full-time musicians, and that's what they do. They sight read for a living. They sight read perfectly for a living. It's a lot of pressure. And so this was a really cool, another way that we connected was Ernesto came in very artistically as opposed to very mechanically, because most of the time they have a staff conductor that is also sight reading. And so it's very mechanical, get the notes right, everything is clear to the beat. But he came in almost not, kind of half caring about the click track and speaking to them artistically. And you could tell that they were like yearning for that, if that makes sense. So it was another cool like connection moment with these guys. And then I recorded, I recorded the solo stuff in my home studio at home. This is Silver Einmine, he's the associate came to my house. It's awesome.
And your favorite pro music too.
Yeah, he performs a lot. Oh yeah, you guys maybe have seen him. He's performed here a lot too. Yeah, he's such a great dude. And I did his headshots for him, and in exchange he gave me an hour, which was great. So we did all the solo work in my home studio. So this is kind of the narrative building that I was talking about. So this, I'm just gonna play this real quick. So this was kind of the fun challenge of this piece, is just taking this pile of random and try to make a story out of it. So those two particular shots happened about 3 months apart, happened about 30 miles from each other, but trying to stitch them together in a way that that tells some kind of a story. So it's like the bird like notices something big coming, takes off. What is it? It's this like awkward teenage moose. And hopefully like the music is trying to enforce that too. It's got the big and so that was really the fascination of this project, is just taking just this random pile of input, throwing it on the ground, trying to rearrange them in some kind of tangible way, and then how does the music sort of catalyze that? How does the music send that story on its way? This is what I was talking about, that I hope there's going to be a chapter 2 to this kind of, that I'm waiting to hear about the grant about, but I'm hoping to do something similar, but mostly at night. So all like nighttime film and photography and stuff like that I'm going to do with a string quartet. So we'll see, but that should be kind of fun and interesting. And then of course there's the technology, and we were talking about that. So this is Cubase. So the final big step of this particular project was the mixing. So each movement ended up with something like 120 to 160 channels of audio. And so to kind of just make that a little bit more accessible, take those and put those into folders or families. And so it was like high winds and low winds. All the strings were separate, so like first and second violins, violas, cellos, basses. But then like high brass, low brass, all brass, just timpani, like, so trying to take those and put those into logical families that can kind of be mixed down together. And then did a whole lot of automation. So automation is basically pre-programming fader moves. And so I don't know if you can see, oh yeah, you can see it down here. So I could go through and basically draw in a fader move that I really wanted, like the celesta to be pushed here. So that fader goes up and then, can take it down a little bit later. And so it's a slow, kind of painstaking process, but that's how, this was by far the biggest mix that I've ever had to deal with. So that's just kind of how I approach that, and just a ton of automation and a lot of trial and error. So, yeah, I specifically wanted to share this experience with you because it just was the most humbling and amazing. That recording day was the best day of my life by far, beyond what I deserved. It's so incredible. And then, if you guys are at all interested in coming to the premiere in December, MSO gives away free tickets to college students. So tell your friends, come. We're playing in St. Peter and Mapleton.
Tell MLC about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I still have my student ID or something. I just flash my. I need my student ID for my current school, so I just flash it everywhere. And okay, you're always so close, student.
You'd pass. You'd pass. I won't tell.
But put it down, I just mark student ID, and then no one questions you when I walk in.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm really pumped because it's going to sound very different live than it does in the recording. But I also have the benefit of having the same conductor who knows it. But we need to, like I created a conductor video for him, so he's got all these visual cues because he refuses to play on click track, which I don't blame him. So he's got visual cues on his particular visual monitor that tells him when tempo changes are or time signature changes, or whatever. And so that'll be an interesting language between him and the orchestra as well. I just want to share a little bit too with our nativity that we're working on right now. So this is just kind of how relationships sort of just snowball, or snowball isn't the right word, but just kind of grow over time. So they, in this particular one, I'm playing most of the percussion and the plucky string things. So like I've got a bunch of weird, like South American guitar kind of things. Rune Rocco is my favorite. And then it's my cellist that I work with on just like every project ever. Her name is Sharon. She might teach here. Sharon Monroe.
I think she might. I'm not sure who the cello teacher is, but yeah, there's a like upper strings teacher, or I think I don't remember who it is. It's like it's someone from the MSO. I don't think it's Justin. He said Stevens. Wow, now I have to think about
Mark.
this. Yeah, I think it might actually be Mark Lama. So he teaches here, so it's like all people that you know, and yeah, different people from the MSO. They teach the different instruments. It's kind of the same thing for the area. I think between Bethany and MLC and Gustavus.
Yeah.
It's like always the same.
It's like those people that just travel around.
Yeah.
I think Dave Ernest teaches here too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He teaches bass.
I think, or like, yeah, I've seen him playing here before too, so I'm, yeah.
Cool.
I know, I'm in the building with these people and different things. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I always write for cello just because Sharon is such a good friend and she's an amazing cellist. It's just fun to write for her. And then there was a flute player, or I shouldn't say flute, winds player. She plays, gosh, she's insane. She's in Orlando. And I think she owns something like 900 wind instruments or something. Her apartment is insane. But her name is Kristen Nagus. And so this is what she does for a living, and she plays like every world wind player known to man. And I met her at a video game music conference 5 years ago, or something like that, and we've kept in touch, and she's introduced me to other musicians that do the same thing, and so I send her MIDI files and scores and stuff like that, and she returns her recordings, and then we go back and forth adjusting some things, and so she's playing like 5 or 6 different wind instruments on this one, but she's incredible. She's done like all of the solo work for the new Lord of the Rings shows, Ori and the Blind Forest, all of the new Avatar Last Airbender stuff is all her. She's amazing.
Is this the person who plays the Duke?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's the same person. So yeah, there's this one famous person that plays all the wind instruments. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know who we're talking about now.
It might not be. There's one person who's mega famous for just the Duke, who like played on Gladiator and stuff. His name is Jivan Gasparian.
Okay, yeah, I just was, I found out about him too. So yeah, a couple of really famous players that just do all the soundtrack work.
He's incredible.
Did he like create his own wind instruments too?
Not this guy. So the Duke, what we're talking about here, is super traditional Armenian instrument, and so Hollywood kind of has taken it over a little bit, and so there was a period in the 90s where like every soundtrack ever was just like all the Duke all the time, and it was always this guy, Jivan Gasparian, and so, but he talked about like what Hollywood asks him to play is nothing like how you traditionally play this Armenian instrument, and so, but now it's become so Hollywoodified that we're just kind of used to it, but it's very like microtonal and doesn't want to stay in one key and all that stuff.
I'm trying to remember, I just went to the Hans Zimmer concert.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
jealous! My friend went to that and she was saying the wind there's this famous wind guy named Pablo something, and that's what that is. Yeah, so I don't know what his last name is or something, but his first name is Pablo, and I'll send you his Instagram.
I can't think of it, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he was at this Hans Zimmer concert in Minneapolis. My friend Megan, who's in the MSO. So she took a video of it and she's like, I have to show you this stuff with the Hans Zimmer concert. Here's this person playing this wind instrument and shells and all those things. So yeah, I wish I could have gone to that, but I mean, that's an example of some of those famous soundtrack musicians who can play all these instruments and like this is what they do. So yeah.
So jealous.
He's in Europe now, if you wanna.
Yeah. I know. I don't work that night. I was so angry. I actually almost drove to Sioux Falls to see him the day before, but I couldn't make it work either.
That's not in the cities.
So jealous. Fun connection is that the cellist for that show, her name is Tina Guo. She played that like crazy electric cello thing. She was also classmates with Austin Wintory, that first composer that I was talking about. And she's weirdly enough, I went to an early music concert up in the cities of all like Renaissance and early Baroque stuff. And I got to talking to their viola da gamba player, her name is Julie Elhard, and this was a couple soundtracks ago when we worked on Snow Queen, the music for that one. And I just like, you interested in trying like some stuff that the bass viol shouldn't do? She's like, yeah. So she was like super gung ho about that. And it was a total disaster, but she was so patient. And I learned a lot about like how different a viola da gamba versus a cello is, because I wrote it like I was writing for cello, but the gamba, even though it looks kind of the same, doesn't do those things. And so we got another pass at it here, and it went much better. But she was so patient. But anyway, I just want to give you a flavor of this one too. So it's, but yeah, this is the kind of, it's so adaptable. So how I usually write for theater is that in little tiny mini movements, I guess you could say. So what I'll do is I'll go through the script and take like 4 or 8 lines. And I know these 4 or 8 lines are going to take about 12 seconds or whatever that happens to be, depending on the emotional delivery and all that stuff. And so it'll play that like musical expression, and then we'll have some kind of mortar in between, some kind of like musical thing that can kind of swirl and not be really super specific until we hit another verbal trigger, another line that'll release the next musical statement. So in this one in particular, there's probably, I think there's like 230 musical cues that when you play them back to back, kind of sound like a piece of music, but they're always following the pace of the action on stage. So, but this is just kind of what this sounds like. And I just exported this, so it's got a little ways to go, but it's kind of what this one sounds like. Let's go back to Krista. So that's the gamba, that's Julie. There's the David. So this is right at the end of Act 1 where Angel Gabriel just told Mary that she's going to be carrying Jesus. There's like wise men montage over here, and then there's Herod being evil over here, all kind of interacting and coming together. And so they all, like Herod's represented by a gamba, and winds are Jesus. Jesus is a big person, that's it. Anyway, so it's all these things kind of coming together for the end of the act here. And then we wanted the instruments to all sound ancient in some way, even though viola da gamba is not like, wasn't around during Jesus' time, obviously. But it sounds ancient, right? Like it sounds timeless. But then the modern cello represents the divine and the stuff that God is capable of, right? So every time the cello just launches, it's always angels and Gabriel and that kind of like omniscient stuff. And so we're kind of hoping those things are sort of informing, helping the audience along, understanding what's going on. Anyway, so that's what we're working on right now is kind of bringing those ideas together. It kind of ties in that idea of adaptability and how you can use recorded music to still follow the pace of action.
When does this be performed?
This is
Not next week, but the week after.
correct. So
For
a week and a half from now, not this Friday, but next Friday we open. And then we'll play.
This weekend is to play here, and so I
Right.
know that they're always at different times, so it's not this weekend when MLC has their play, it's this weekend after.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people will be able to make it to that.
We're doing, I think we're doing 9 performances or something. We're doing a lot of performances in this one, so yeah. It's a lot.
And you have Christmas, like, songs that people know kind of worked in that, like I heard Savior Venetians come.
Yep.
Worked into that, so there are some kind of familiar tunes that are woven into the soundtrack with these, like, ancient sounding instruments. And
Yeah.
things.
And that was a unique aspect of this one too, is that it was all just little like, some of them are more obvious than others, because Pete is, the director, is a big vocalist, you know, he loves singing, he's got a band, whatever, so there's a lot of singing in the play. But then how do we take these super familiar Christmas carols and make them sound a little less familiar? I'm not a Christmas guy, I'm not like a Christmas guy. I know. Much to the chagrin of my mother, I'm glad she hasn't like sent me down the river yet, but she's like the most Christmas person of all time. But like trying to take these Christmas things and make them surprising again, if that makes sense, to make them, yeah. You guys got any questions? Anything that I just kind of babbled, I'm sorry.
No, this is good. I'll let you guys go first, so you guys can lead.
There's a lot of cool stuff, because we haven't had anyone really come and talk about like sound design yet.
Oh, sure.
It's usually just been like notating
Yeah.
church music and stuff.
They had David Von Camp and do his meeting, so you know him, right?
Yep.
Yes, yeah. So he was classmates with one of my church musician friends and stuff, and jazz and everything. So, of course, he couldn't make it up here to from Nebraska, so it's
Sure.
Well, my question, this is kind of not for me, but kind of for the benefit of everyone else and everyone watching on video. Like, so you grew up in the Midwest and everything. You went to Bethany and got a music degree, and then now you're working with professional orchestras in Budapest and with the MSO and doing all these different things. Like, how do you get from being a college student who's interested in music to landing gigs and getting connected with people? Because like when you're in college, it can seem like such a big leap, but
Right.
how do you get to the point where you are? Like, what's your advice?
A couple things. I would say don't be afraid to knock on the door. And that's easier said than done, because I would not at all say that I'm a confident person. I'm not a confident person. And so it can be really terrifying sometimes to knock on the door. But that really is the key, is to ask. So like this MSO thing wouldn't have happened if there was my first time that I wrote for MSO wouldn't have happened without just being like, hey, what if? And so like trying to encourage yourself that you have an idea that's worth pursuing that might be worth it to somebody else too. But be ready for some rejection for that too, because for every cool project that comes along, there's probably 8 that don't. And that's okay, because you'll recycle that idea and that idea will manifest later on. And so that's totally fine. And then the other thing is, this sounds like the most basic advice of all time, but I would say always put in your most honest effort. I won't say your best effort, because a lot of times, especially when you're kind of thrown into the deep end where you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what your best is. You have no idea. But you do always know what your honest effort is, right? And then, again, it sounds so basic, but treat everyone with kindness. Because you would be shocked how many people cannot handle those two things at the same time. And you see it all the time. Like, either somebody is a brilliant jerk, or they're like super schmoozy, but they're, kind of lazy. And so, and people can pick up that, if you're honest about who you are, what you can and can't do. And not to say like, there is a fake it to make it kind of thing once in a while, but that's very different from being dishonest from padding your resume, if you guys know what I mean. So like, be very honest about what you can and can't do, be kind about it, be grateful for those who give you advice, but also trust that the idea that you have, let me rephrase that, trust that the idea that you're passionate about is worth being passionate about. Because otherwise art wouldn't exist if one person wasn't super passionate about some crazy idea at some point. So I think that's really it. And then it's not, and then relationships start to develop. A lot of people give advice of like, go to as many conferences as possible, and insert yourself into conversations and whatever. I can't do that. Like, that's terrifying. And so it's just, if you're kind to people, if you're genuinely interested in their background and what they're doing and what their ideas are, they're going to remember you a lot more than the person that had the perfect joke or the perfect anecdote during your cocktail conversation. You know what I mean? And so I guess that's what I would say, is that always your honest effort, be kind to everyone, and look, be open to how you can, how your personality and your artistic personality can manifest in some kind of collaborative situation. If that makes sense. Yeah. And it's interesting as some kind of artist too, that if you look back, it's kind of the good and the bad. It's there was that old only way to describe art is the agony and the ecstasy, because you get something done and you super love it, but then you instantly have to move on to the next thing. And then hopefully 4 or 5 years later, you looked on that thing that you did that you loved at the time and be like, man, I was like, there's so many things I could have done better. I'm so much more, you know, and so like you always want to have that experience where you're always getting better, but at the same time, it becomes more difficult to like celebrate the things that you did accomplish, or celebrate isn't the wrong word, but like be filled by it. Yeah,
Like
exactly.
imposter syndrome is very real.
Yeah,
and I've
right.
like heard kind of anything you do as a musician, and so like there's a balance between like knowing that you have things to learn, but then also being like, no, I have something good to offer people.
Right.
You know, I have a good idea here, and let's pursue that. So it's really hard to find that balance where like you don't feel like your talents or your gifts are worthless or anything like that, but you know you can kind of jump in there and get your feet wet and you know pursue different ideas and stuff. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's hard to figure out sometimes, but
I think it's always hard to figure out. Might not be possible to figure out. And then it kind of feels like if you do have it figured out, then you're overconfident. You know what I mean? It's like it's a tricky thing, but that's the life of art, I guess. Yeah. Anything else? Oh.
Okay. Where can we find you and your music and stuff?
HearBenji.com is my website, which I sorely need to update. But what's that?
Better than our club website.
It's an MLC page.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I have a Spotify channel and pretty much all the bigger things that I'm allowed to put on Apple Music, Spotify, whatever. It's all there, whatever. You guys have my email and stuff now too. So if I can ever be helpful, or you want to chat, or if you want to have me back sometime, I'm always happy to come in.
For Theory 4 and stuff, we're gonna work on some bigger types of projects and things, and thinking of having some guest composers come and like talk to a class, like not like talk to a club or something, but like talk to people in a class or something. And the project is gonna be choral composition, but I'm just thinking, so who is local that I can bring in? Like I know a lot of people that can probably zoom in, but yeah, I'll be thinking of some ways to integrate that in the future. So
Sure.
it's fun to have local composers around like you, and yeah, so many other people that we're blessed to have in this area. So
I'm just a Mankato and I love hanging out with music nerds, so let's do it.
so yeah, and if you come to Bethany and watch theater, you get to hear Benji soundtracks and action. So that's fun. Yeah. Do you guys want a picture? Like, could I take a picture with you guys with Benji? Sure.
I was gonna ask you
Oh,
guys if you selfie with me too.
so they have an Instagram account, and we're trying to get more things on the Instagram account.